Hey everybody, good morning and welcome back to Reaper Pro Tips with me, your host, Anne, and disembodied voice Justin, who I forgot to put in my ears, so he's going to be ghosty until we do that. Hey everybody. Morning. I slept a little better last night. How about you? How about you guys? How has your day been? Has it been an okay Tuesday? I can't believe how fast January is disappearing, guys. Like, I'm blown away by how fast this month is, like, disapparating. Am I quiet? I actually adjusted my mic yesterday because it had gone back to 40 instead of 80. Let me go and check. See if Windows has once again effed up. Yep, it's effed up. So tell me, Windows, like, how is it, Windows, that, like, you can go 2 weeks without me needing to adjust my sound, and then in 2 days you can require me to adjust my sound twice? How about that, Windows? Microsoft, I don't hear you saying anything. Possibly you should check your sound. Seriously. If only OBS worked on Mac. Where are we? Here we are. Oh yeah, rainy, windy days are the best for painting. I wish I had a rainy, windy day. I'm like disappointed that I haven't gotten more rain. Like, it's supposed to be the rainy season in winter here. And when I visited David during the winter, it was rainy. And during the fall. But apparently when I moved here, all the rain went away. I scared it away or something. Like, because the day that I moved here was the last really, really rainy, stormy day. Well, not that I ever really get thunder here, but yeah. So apparently I scared all the rain away. We've had a little bit, just a little bit here and there since I moved here, like this winter, but like not as much as I was led to believe. Like, the trees must be sad. Like, I'm like, come on, more water for the trees. Yeah, I know my mom said even in Arizona they were expecting rain. Which was, it's always big news when it rains there, so. Alrighty, I'm going to get my thing here. We're going to do some, I was going back and forth about whether to introduce a color here, but I think I'm going to go bronze. I think I want to do them bronze. I'll try them bronze with some green verdigris, and we'll see if I like it. Yeah, I know. I can't really complain, right, Kerniko? Like, I can't believe that I can find cause. I was thinking about that this morning, actually. I was like, Anne, think about what Texas would be like right now. I had 75 degrees to walk in yesterday. Like, seriously. They do steal all the good weather, Kerniko. Although Scotland is pretty darn beautiful in the spring and summer, in my opinion. Having been there during that time. Like, I don't mind the rain in the spring. We were in Edinburgh in March or April, where all the daffodils are coming out. And the temperatures weren't that bad, and I actually liked how the rain looked. Like, you guys get, out there in the British Isles in general, I think you guys get this awesome combo where you get, like, just bursts of rain and then bits of sun and bursts of rain and bits of sun. Like, I noticed that in Scotland and in Ireland. And I kind of like that, like, as I like rain, so, but I also like rainbows, so you have, like, the best. Yeah, well, I do not miss Wisconsin. Let's get that straight up, muses. There's no way that, like, I didn't think, well, how is it like in Wisconsin right now? Because I know it sucks. Yeah, outside walking would be very brisk. Yeah, no, I am very thankful for my, it's very windy here today, so I wonder if the weather's going to shift. Right now, what is it here? What is it here in the South Bay, where we have stolen all the good weather? It is 57 degrees and very windy. Apparently, in fact, there are power outages in San Francisco because of the wind. Yeah, spring, summer only last week. That's the problem with Wisconsin, Kreniko. Not that the summer does last, but like spring and fall are like 2 weeks each. So you don't get any of the real transition. You get freaking cold to humid and hot, and then you get and then in the fall you get like a week and a half of pretty trees, and then it's brown and cold and dreary. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Wisconsin. I do not miss the weather. There are other things to like about Wisconsin, especially about Madison, but all right, so I'm going to start popping. I'm going to use rich leather from my base for bronze, and then I'm going to grab some dark green. I haven't decided on my dark green because my favorite dark green for verdigris is canceled, peacock green. Though we could certainly mix something like it. I'm just using this straight up. I haven't added any water to it at all. Figure I just put on a nice thick coat. Oh, gonna get in focus. Focus, focus, and focus. Sunny and 43 where you are. Nice, nice, Nara. The sun followed me over here. Well, maybe I just attract sunniness and I should come back to Scotland. Like, I've been wanting to get back to the UK because I loved Scotland and Ireland, to be honest. And I wanted to see more of those places. Because I didn't get all the way out west in Ireland, and I was sick in my trip in Scotland. I ate a bad egg for breakfast one morning, and like we were going to St. Andrews, and I was just like horribly sick. Like the kind of sick where you can't even keep water down. So sadly, my trip to Scotland, like I was alive for the first part of it, and I really enjoyed it. And then for the last part of it, I was like recovering from being vilely ill. And I love eggs, but I couldn't eat eggs after that for like 3 years. It was not a Scotch egg. It was just a normal breakfast egg. But it, like, I had such a violent reaction to eggs after that. And like I said, I love eggs, so... And there was nothing else I had eaten that morning that could have been off, because I just had some, like, cereal or toast or something. Like, I had something totally innocuous that would not make you violently ill. So the egg must have just been a little bit off. But it made me sad because I do love eggs, and eventually I got over it and loved eggs again. But yeah, it was a sad end to my Scotland trip because I just loved Edinburgh. I hiked a lot around Edinburgh, and I really have wanted to get back. But then, you know, I had a lot of dogs, and it's hard to, you know, we had one dog who's a trouble dog, so we really couldn't kennel him. So we had to have people come to watch our dogs if we were going to go, you know, on a vacation, and it just made it very hard. So now that I'm temporarily dogless, I thought I would maybe take advantage of that. Your country people poisoned me. Yeah, well, you know, Kurtiko. They just didn't know, right? They didn't know any better. They're just thinking that we were some obnoxious Americans or something. Although I think my family's pretty non-obnoxious. Like, I mean, Wisconsinites tend to be pretty laid back, all things considered. If anything, we tend to be repressed and not obnoxious. So the opposite of obnoxious. We just sit there and glare at you if we're unhappy. All right, so just kind of trimming up the bronze on this leg. I am going to line around it since this is her, like, alive leg. Alive. And this will be, I may put some bronze on this leg because I've got these streakies going on here. So it'd be kind of cool to do a little bit of bronze showing through on the other leg. But that could be tricksy with highlights and shadows. So I'm not certain yet. Edinburgh. Yeah. Right? I thought so. I thought it was Edinburgh. Maybe I said borough because I've been out of the country for a while. At times, I like slide back and forth between the proper accents. Yeah, I really enjoyed Ireland for much the same reason. And I always stayed at B&Bs. I really like staying at bed and breakfasts and, like, you know, getting to know the family that owns it. And you usually you can get some really helpful recommendations on, you know, what to do, where to go, and what not to do, where not to go. We went to see Tara, and we went to see one of the more ancient churches, one of the really, really old churches that was mostly just down, but there were some really beautiful ancient, like, tombstones and stuff. And I love ancient stuff. The older, the better, really. So sites like that really make me happy. Same in Scotland, like going to see the old, like, fallen down cathedrals and everything, just really gets my geek on. I love it. I love ancient buildings. I thought very heavily about becoming an archaeologist when I was in college. I took a lot of archaeology and anthropology courses to learn how to dig things up. My bronze, what I start bronze with, is actually a leather color, Moonglooms. Rich leather. You could also, other good colors for this, other good colors for starting bronze. What I used to start bronze with is actually 9127. Oh boy, it's the one after green ochre. Uniform brown. Uniform brown was my original bronze color. Rich leather, though, has the advantage in that I can just usually add white to it to go up. Whereas with uniform, I felt like I had to add a little bit more of other things. This is a really saturated color. The downside is it doesn't have as good coverage as uniform does, so you may want to go with uniform brown. You can compare the two. They're very similar colors. But in general, for bronze, you want kind of almost a greeny, like you want a really yellowy, but you also want kind of a greeny brown. And of course, it also depends on how fresh your bronze is. Bronze darkens down pretty extremely when it tarnishes. So it kind of depends also on what you're doing there. Hey, Kaz, thanks for the resub. 21 months. Kaz with the imposing resub. Only 3 months to your double subiversary. That sounds better. But yeah, I'm kind of going on memory. Like the last time I did bronze, I really liked it. I remember starting with rich leather. I don't remember so much what I went up with. I think I just went up with white, but there may have been some yellow in there. We'll find out by trying to replicate the bronze that I really liked. And then we'll have the recipe for posterity on the interwebs. So I'm going to put a line here. Oh, rich leather is so useful for so many things. I also use it as a base for gold NMM moonglooms, and it's really good for that. It's NMM Gold Shadow. Technically, you could also use as a base for bronze. You just would not use the other members of the triad. But all of these darker, more greenish browns, not dark, but darker, medium dark, I would like to say. I would call them medium to medium dark, are good bases for bronze if you're looking to get it kind of shiny or shiny in bits. Dark bronze gets very, very dark indeed. Like really, really tarnished bronze. So then you want to study pictures. I think I have pictures of David in front of bronzes. We went to one of the colleges around here. It has a Rodin exhibit in one of their plazas. So we're just going to get in and hey, Chia. Yeah, it's almost black. Almost black. Yeah, Valendar. That's kind of how, like, sometimes you get that with the statues that are outdoors. Because the weather can actually, bring up some areas and others will get very dark. And then they'll start to oxidize. Here, for example, although I'm starting really light, I will probably darken it down. Maybe with... If we really want to go greenish, we would go down with something like we would actually mix black in. Oh, hold on. There we go. Yeah. Yeah, I like staying at B&Bs. I like seeing actually talking to people who generally if you're going to own a B&B, you're a relatively friendly person and genuinely like meeting travelers and helping them, so at least in my experience. All right, so we've got a nice line around that particular thing. We also want to make the blade of the spear bronze. When that happens, Chia, you have to pick it up right away and put it in your water jar. Right away. Like, just don't even hesitate. The minute it falls in paint, you just bloop right in the water. And the reason you do that is that all the paint that is dry is going to be perfectly safe in your water jar. But the red that you just dropped it in is not going to be safe. And then you can pick it out, grab a big brush, but a soft brush, and kind of scrub it just under the water like you're washing dishes. No, never surrender. In the future, I'm telling you this for your next time it'll happen, because it happens to me, it happens to everybody does it. Next time it happens, grab the mini, throw it in your water jar. And that will save your paint job, and will allow you to take the red off really easily. Then you just kind of, go just under the water so you can see it and use your water and get the red all off. Rinse it, swoosh it around in there, bring it out, and just let it dry. It'll be fine. But you got to move fast. You got to be willing to do that. So everybody, when you do this, because everyone does it, including me, when you get fumble fingers and drop your mini into the paint, just throw it in your water. Because once acrylic cures, it's not going to strip up. Yeah, when you do it again tomorrow. But yeah, just so you know, it's not irreparable, and everybody has butterfingers, especially me. I do it at least I'd say every 3 months. Aw, resident cats are the best. Alright, so I'm gonna I could just try brown liner. Could just try that. It's mostly black. Let's do that. Let's try a mixture of rich leather and brown liner to get some shading on this. And we want some green. Sometimes I'll just go straight in with green and I won't even bother to take it down otherwise, but yeah, we'll see. This is an interesting surface to do NMM on because it's very much a cylinder, but it's kind of tilted away from the light. So if I mix a little bit of my brown liner into my rich leather, I end up with kind of a muddy, but kind of greeny brown like this. Actually, you guys can't really see the green. Let me grab my black base. Let's see, and let's get this in here, and let's do a little bit closer. Still not quite showing up. Yeah, it's a little bit better. It is a little greenish. It's a brown, but it's like... Yeah, you can kind of see it there. And the reason that it turns greenish is that you have a lot of yellow in your rich leather, and then you've got a lot of black in your brown liner. Yellow plus black equals green, even if there's other stuff in it. Nothing is off topic ever, Grumble Drum. Ever. Nothing is off topic on this stream. Okay, well, politics is off topic because we slid yesterday and Justin had to jerk us back from the precipice. But other than that, yeah, I mean, there are several good brush-on primers. A lot of people will say Stynylrez, which is it's Badger, isn't it, guys? Primer, or is it Testers? I don't remember which one it is. I think it's Badger, though. It's normally used for airbrushing, but some people swear that it's a good brush-on. I personally just use the Reaper brush-on primer. You just thin it a little bit, because it's quite tenacious, and if you don't thin it, it'll fill in details. So use a softer brush, and I go maybe 5 drops of Reaper primer to 1 drop of water, and I shake it up like a crazy person, because it's a really fine primer, which is why it sticks to metal decently. But it's, because it's fine, it tends to settle out in the bottle. So shake it like crazy. I find Vallejo brush-on to be a little soft, and that's the base that they tend to use. I find that it rubs off a little bit too readily for me, but I used to use it, and it's a fine primer if you're ready for that. Yeah, so there's plenty of good brush-ons. The one I really don't like, I hate to say this, I hate to diss any company's product, but I really don't like Games Workshop's one. Last time I used it anyway, not only does it smell terrible chemically, but it just seems really kind of goopy and sticky. I was not impressed. And I don't know how it does on bones, on Reaper bones. So it really also depends on what you're putting it on, right? So yeah, I haven't tried the Vallejo airbrush primer. Because I airbrush so little, the only airbrush Vallejo colors I own are the metallics, because they're far superior to the regular metallics, in my opinion. And even then, I haven't experimented with those as much as I should have. Alright, let's grab some of this, like, greeny shadow. So this is a cylinder, and the way that we highlight cylinders is wherever the light is going to come down is where that highlight's going to go. However, here we have a weird caveat, because as you can see, the leg is tilted forward, so the area that would normally get the highlight going straight down from here is actually in shadow. So what we need to do is we need to block that in to remind ourselves, hey, there's a shadow here, and I can't highlight it like I normally would. So you don't have to be real neat about it either. You just want to put it in there. Block in the shadow. If you've got some wet paint, you can kind of wet blend a little. So remind yourself, hey, there's a shadow here. And kind of look at it. You have to kind of look to see where the light will logically fall away. So here, like, her leg is up here. There's going to be a highlight here. And then probably the main highlight's actually going to fall down the side here. So I need to actually get this shadow over even more. Until my eyes see, if I turn it toward my light, or I get a light out and I hold it up underneath my light, I kind of have to look to see where is the light actually falling. Oh, I'm throwing things all over. And when I held it up to my overhead light, I was seeing a highlight going here and down the side. So I'm going to say that this is my cutoff line. Because remember how important it is with non-metallic metal to have shadow right under or very close to your highlight in order to get that shiny look. So I have to make sure that wherever my main highlight's going to go, I have to have a shadow close to it. Good to know, Vithiel. Good to know. Oh, D. Clearman almost with it. Actually, 21. Yeah, so that also is because he was one of our first subscribers. So he is has that imposing 21 month. In 3 months, he will be at the 2-year mark. Impressive. Way to support. Alright, so I'm kind of fuzzing out that line now that I figured out where my shadow line goes. I'm painting some rich leather over the top of it. It's going to take a couple of coats because rich leather is, especially as I have thinned it, is a bit transparent. But that's alright. You can just work with it. The liners are a little harder to wet blend with because their consistency and chemical composition is a little bit different from your normal paint. Although they work fine mixed together, sometimes I find that if I try to wet blend one into the other, I can run into some difficulties just because it's so different. That never really dissuades me if I really feel like it, though. Alright, so I want a shadow under that knee, because I'm going to have one right under this rim. And just going to keep away from the light. I'm probably going to have a little bit of light coming in, reflected light coming in on the underside of this knee. So maybe I'll just grab this and work this in. So bring that knee just a little bit up on the bottom side. See that lighter band there? And I want to keep it a rounded kind of shape because this is a round, it's kind of a round kneecap shape. So I want to make sure I accentuate that shape and don't just put a line or a square or a rectangle. You want to always highlight and shade in accordance with the shape of the surface that you're working on. Not just on metal either. Will Michael be on the afternoon? People want to know. Is Clever Crow back with us this afternoon, Justin?
Yes, it is. It's actually a Q&A.
Oh, all right. Q&A with Michael. Go and ask him all the hard questions, guys. Not many things you've done consistently for 21 months in a row. I know the feeling. I do know the feeling. All right, so I'm putting a slightly darker shadow way up near the top here. Because I want contrast. So I want it to be quite dark up there. Down here, I'm still wavering. We'll see. We'll see how dark I want to take this area. And part of that I'll probably get when I put my highlight on because it'll kind of inform me how much I need. And I will need an under reflection on this surface too, so it won't all stay dark. It will actually come back up a bit. And what I may find is that I have to put down some white. We'll see. No, maybe not. If sometimes when you're going over a transparent, like a dark coat with a transparent color, you find that you need to lay down some white to get your proper light back, or it's going to take you 60 zillion coats. This looks okay, though, so I'm going to just run with it. I'm just putting in a little bit of a lighter area where the calf is, because it's going to bulge out and it's going to catch some light. Probably the underside of this anklet is going to catch some light. I'm going to leave some dark in here. And I'm going to adjust this as I go, depending on what I see. So this is all just a block in. So you can see I've lightened the underside just a little bit because the reason is there's going to be bounced light coming back up at this leg from this stone. And the stone is light colored, so it's going to actually bounce quite a bit of light. I have been studying, when I go on my walks, I've been studying, I go and sit by our fountain in our courtyard, which is a fountain that's a bunch of big slabs of rock together and with water running down them, which is fun to meditate in front of. But what I've really been watching is kind of the way the light reflects at various times of day onto those rocks from the surrounding water and other rocks. So when I tell you to go and observe nature, if you want to get better at lighting, it's a thing. I do it. You can also look at how other painters have done these things, but I find it's very instructive to get a real sense yourself of how things look. Because painters, all of us, will take shortcuts. So when you're looking at how a miniature painter has portrayed a surface or a bounced light or something, they could be making a stylistic choice that isn't very realistic, and maybe you decide that you don't want to do that. Morning, Dragon. Daffodweir, when I'm choosing a model for competition, it had better be near flawless. It has to be something I'm really, really excited to paint. So there have to be sections of the model that I really think I'll enjoy. So, and that can be hard if I'm working like on something for like Golden Demon, right? For Games Workshop's competition, where I mucked up that knee a little bit. Where that I don't game a lot of it, so I have to find a model that just looks cool that I think will really excite me on that, maybe with some good fluff. But what I look for really is a sculpt that's really good. I don't want any muddiness. I want a very tight sculpt. I don't want a lot of stuff I have to correct on it. Hey, Raiders. Playing the mud. Welcome. We are Reaper. Obviously. I'm Anne. This is our morning show, which is Reaper Pro Tips, which I am a pro. I take money for painting and have for years. But anyway, so we paint a bunch of different models on here. And today we're working on mocking and some of the bronze for our living statue, who is, here, let me zoom out here. She's turning to, I wanted to do something that was stone, but turning to flesh. So that's what we've been working on. So now I'm blocking in some of the bronze areas on her. So she's going to have a leg armor plate that's bronze. Her spear tip, we're about to coat that in bronze. And then I need to remember her arm guard here as well. I was originally thinking about doing some color on those areas, but I realized I could do color on like things like the feathers and the wrap on the spear. Since she's just a statue, I didn't want to go too overboard on bright colors on her. She does come naked, but I altered the model so that she would be Twitch acceptable and painted a bikini on her. So yeah, so she does come very naked, as does her male companion. There's both a guy and a girl in this set. And the other one I'm going to paint as entirely bronze. But this lady, and here's her shield. We haven't done the shield arm yet, but she has a cool bull's head shield too. So she's like obviously just noticed an intruder and is starting to come to life. You can see that her one foot is planted and her one foot is starting to lift and her spear is lifting. So that's why we are painting it this way. But yeah, so the cracks are free-handed except for the cracks on the helmet. The helmet is actually sculpted as if it is stone. But the rest of the model is left pretty freeform. So you could paint it either way. You could paint it metal or stone as you wished. So yeah, that's where we are. And this is our model by Jean Van Horn. And that's the item number for your reference. But yeah, so I'm doing a non-metallic metal on these. So what I'm doing is shades of brown to represent the bronze color, and we'll also put some green verdigris in there. I'm gonna thicken up my rich leather so I can paint the other areas bronze that I wanted to paint bronze. I thinned it down while I was layering some highlights, and now I need it back to full. So this is our color, our base color for the bronze. You can see it's kind of a greenish-y brown color, kind of a medium dark. And that's a pretty good starting point for bronze. You can always darken it, as I did underneath the leg, if you want to get a more tarnished bronze look. So let's get these things blocked in. But yeah, we're doing a lot of different models on here. We also are doing a Sphinx, and we're doing the Rock Troll, who's almost done. I started sculpting his basing last time he was on. We're doing a couple character models. And a dancing girl. We're doing a catfolk rogue and a dancing girl and a Highlander, female Highlander. So that I could agonize over plaid and everybody could hear me cuss a lot. Not really. This is a pretty family-friendly show. Internally, though. Internally, I'm lighting it up. Let me be honest about that. Because plaid. I could have made it easy on myself, but no. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to make the whole spearhead there. And then I'm going to do the arm here. And once again, when I get to a certain point, I like to base coat everything so that I have then a sense of how the color composition on the model is really working. Up to that point, I tend to work in sections so that I can finish an entire section and get that sense of completion before I move on to the next section. So I've done that with things like a lot of the stone texture, parts of the skin with the torso here so that I could get a feel for how this is actually looking, which I'm very happy with right now. But yeah, we have a lot of little things to do yet on this model. So that's why it looks like I've got some parts that are almost done or done, and then there are other parts that are still in progress, is that I tend to paint that way. I paint slowly, and so for me, if I were to just base coat and then slowly try to paint everything, it would take me forever, and I would get really discouraged because the model would essentially spend forever not looking done. So I tend to paint in sections so that I can get the reward of, hey, it's looking good through here, and that keeps me painting. Like, when I look at this and I'm really happy with this area, then that keeps me interested in getting the rest of it to that level. So it's a little mental tactic that I use because I know how I am. It just also tends to lend itself well to shows like this. So I can, paint an entire section and mostly finish it during the course of a show. It varies by what it is, of course, but all right, so let's mix a highlight to this and see if we can get this bronze looking cool. I'm gonna lean her a little bit here. And I'm gonna start just adding pure white to rich leather and see what I get. Sometimes we experiment a bit. Also, for those who are new on the raid, I also was, up until like April of last year, I worked for Reaper full-time on-site, and I was their paint line creator. So I created all this paint. I actually made all the formulas by hand. I used to mix every batch by hand. I mixed every batch by hand for about 15 years. So when I talk about the paint, often I'll talk about like color characteristics or pigment characteristics or paint chemistry type stuff. It's kind of my shtick. It's what I do. It's a little bit different. This is a very deconstructive painting show. I'm not just going to paint and say, oh, look what I can do. I'm going to actually try to explain to you guys why it works, how it works, what I'm thinking about while I do it. I like that approach a bit better. I like to pull back the curtain a little bit. We talk a lot about brushes and brush characteristics. We talk a lot about thinning and why. For our highlights, for example, we want a thinner paint. So white plus rich leather gives us this color, which is actually really close to our skin color. That could be problematic. At this point, I may decide that I need a little bit more yellow on this subject. What shall I do? Shall I put lantern in? Or shall I put lemon in? So my problem here now is that when I just go up with white, this is a little bit more yellow, but it still looks a lot like my skin tone. So this could create a real problem if my bronze looks too much like my skin. It could be really visually confusing. So what I need to do, I think, is add just a little bit of yellow. And I have to decide what yellow I'm gonna use. And I think, there are three choices. We could use NMM Gold Highlight, which is kind of a buttery yellow. We could use something really like spit in your eye, strong, which is what I tend to do, like lantern yellow, which is like boom, yellow. Or we could do something kind of a little bit more weird. We could go with lemon. I'm pretty sure I didn't use lemon last time, though. Lemon is relatively new coming back into my... It's actually not really a coffee because it's still too yellow for that, Inara, but I don't know. I'm going to try it straight up a little bit on the side here. See how I like it. I'm actually going to throw a little bit more rich leather into there, though. I'm going to darken it down, richen it up a little bit. It's a little bit too white. My white is very strong. The reason for that is that pure white is a very highly pigmented white, and so it covers really well. And when you add it to a transparent color like this rich leather, it also shifts it really heavily. So, yeah, it's more like a tea. It's yellower than that, though. It depends on the tea, I guess. Yeah, it's not, this one doesn't say coffee color to me like yesterday's did. Like, I usually am looking a little bit more brown, even reddish with some coffee and tea. Alright, so let's just put a little bit of highlight here. I'm going to just go up the side of the leg, and the reason I'm going up the side of the leg is that normally, with a cylinder shape like this is, it's kind of a wrapped around her leg, right? Normally with a cylinder shape, you know, like this thigh, you'd have the highlight running right down the middle. But this is turned away from the light. It's bending back. So we have a shadow underneath it for sure. But then we have to look at it and we have to see, well, there's light falling right here. So where does that light end up falling? If I draw a line right down this highlight, it ends up falling right here and going down here. So that's where we're putting our highlight down. And I'm going to start just doing this white plus rich leather, and then I'm going to pop some yellow into it probably. And my brush stroke is across rather than up and down. A lot of people will be tempted to highlight up and down on this surface. You don't want to. When you have a long surface like this, when you make a brush stroke, when you're highlighting, that's up and down kind of along with this surface being so long that way, what you do is the eye immediately can see your brush strokes. Like you're going to be able to see your brush strokes so much more if you do that. So whereas if you go against the grain, as so to speak, you kind of confuse the viewer's eye. You kind of confuse your eye. You don't see the brush strokes as much. So going acrossways is actually a good tactic to try to hide your brush strokes. Now I do see that I've got a rim around this, an edge of sorts. So I do probably need to drop some highlight on that too. I won't highlight necessarily the whole thing. I'll kind of look at it and see, well, a lot of light's probably falling right here. There's probably a lot of light hitting up here on the rim. I'm probably going to throw a shadow in there. Going to bring that color back in. Grab I might even line, since if I want to, I could line around this edge. We could do it either way. We could paint the whole thing like it's bronze and just paint it to kind of be a gentle kind of, you know, outline. Or if we decide we want this center section to be very different and put apart from the main, apart from the edge, then we could do a line, an actual dark line like we did around the whole thing. Yeah, I have French pressed tea. But the color, I just don't find teas to mostly be yellow unless you're like using maybe a green and oolong mix. I mostly find them to be more reddish, but that's talking mostly black tea. Or pu'er, which is very reddish. In our, come on, happy positivity. Sending you happy positivity vibes. Must think happy. Life kicks us enough. All right, I'm going to actually go for the lantern yellow. I've decided. I don't know. Oh, maybe I should do a whole bunch. Yeah, let's do a whole bunch. Let's see what happens. That's good. Let's experiment. As Anne tries to rediscover her really good bronze highlight after she's screwed it up and not written it down and forgotten it. So I'm going to do 3, 2, 3. And let's do, since I'm pretty sure it wasn't lemon yellow, I'm going to put lemon yellow aside. I'm going to do 1 NMM. Yes, strong tea is good. But I don't like bitter tea. When the tannins get really, really heavy, I'm out. I don't like it. Then it's going to go down the sink. And then I'm going to put a drop of lantern over here. So these are very different yellows, as you can see. And they're going to have very different effects on the color. So this was just white. So we already have a kind of a control, so to speak, right? If we're doing an experiment. It's a paint experiment. Hey, Karu. Welcome. We are doing paint experiments. I'm trying to manufacture the highlight that I used the last time I did bronze that I really liked. All right, so that lantern pushes this super yellow. It doesn't lighten it very much, but it does push it very, very yellow, which could be to our advantage. We'll look at that. We'll keep that. You can see how yellow that is, though. That really interacted. And you see how, because lantern doesn't have, it has a tiny bit of white in it, but it doesn't have very much. So you can see how little it shifted it compared to here where we put pure white in and it woof, it was like putting cream in coffee, right? It totally overwhelmed it. And now with our NMM gold highlight, that's going to give us a little bit more of a white. You can see that there's more white in NMM gold highlight, right? So it's shifting it lighter. I don't know. I may have used lantern. This is very interesting to me. I did an awesome bronze a while ago that I really liked, and I foolishly did not write down the formula, probably because I was like, this is obvious, I could recreate this. Paint experiments are how you learn, though, Karu. That's my philosophy. I always am encouraging everybody to play around with paint. Because you can do like things like this, right? You can kind of see, oh, I added white. Look how much it bleached it out. Oh, I added yellow. Look how saturated it got and how golden. Oh, I added kind of a mix of the two, and now it's kind of halfway between. Which one is going to make a better bronze, you know? I'm going to actually do a little bit of white into this lantern one. Just a tiny bit. So like half. When I do this, you guys see me do this a lot lately, actually. So what I did is I kind of squeezed out some white, and then I dabbed it off against the side of my palette. So essentially it's about a half drop. Because I didn't want to do a full drop, because I know this is going to shift it a lot. So I'll do that a lot. It's not very precise, but in general, I feel like I get roughly the same amount of white every time. Close enough, really. That's really nice and warm. I like that. Bronze does go pretty yellow when it's polished, so I'm okay with that. I think I'm going to run with that. And then I need to dig out a dark green too. I have peacock green here, but I think I'm going to use dragon and maybe add a dark blue to it because peacock green is no longer in production. So the people have voted and peacock green was a sad color. So I'm going to pop in some yellow here, and I'm going to go back over my highlight here with this yellowy color. And maybe I'll get some white mixed up so I can do some interim mixes real quick and try this. We're trying to find the right highlight for this bronze. I don't want it to go gold. So this is probably, that's as yellow as I'm going to take it. I won't take it up much more. I'll probably go and just mix some pure white. Yeah, well, that's cool, Karu. I talk a lot about pretty basic stuff in here, too. We're doing a little bit more of an advanced topic today, but, I mean, even so, a lot of the time I talk about thinning your paint and what brushes and stuff like that. So if you're new, if there's a particular thing you are struggling with right now, do not be afraid to ask a question, and you may feel like you're pushing me off topic, but on this show, nothing is off topic. I try to always answer questions, even if I have to stop a bit on the model I'm working on. Because the question that's in your head is likely in the head of other people here. And so never hesitate to ask because somebody will always get value out of the answer. Even though we have a lot of people who've been watching this show for eons, like because we just had some resubs for 21 and 22 months. But even so, everybody can always even benefit from a repetition of information, in my opinion. Because you never absorb everything all at once, especially when there's a brain dump. Catnat. Catnat Nat. I like your name. Catnat, on this stream, I tend to bounce around a bit. It depends. Like, sometimes I do talk about things like base coating and getting a good solid base coat. Like here, I talked about, I do thin my paint for base coats, but I also base coat right over the top of bones, for example. I wash it instead of priming it for these plastics from Reaper. I always prime metals, though. If you have, there's not a dedicated time, but like I said, if you have a beginner question and you have a particular topic that you are struggling with, ask. Chances are, I mean, I'm just base coating some of this stuff, so if you have a particular question, chances are I can demo on some part of this model. I'm going to take this mold line off real quick with my knife, since I just noticed it, and it's irritating me. So yeah, if you guys have questions, ask away. Chances are I can totally answer it by demoing on some part that we haven't painted yet. we like this show to be good for everybody. So, and that includes beginners. Yeah, it's never a stupid question on this show. Ah, thanks, Grizz. Yeah, I'm terrible about that. It absolutely does, and I'm awful about it. The way that I kind of talk myself into compensating for this is that I use my really big brush. I used to be just really hard on brushes. Like, I would even do that with my tiny brushes. But Grizz, what I do now, since I'm using the big brush, is the paint doesn't really get up into the ferrule very much. Like, I have never put a bit of brush cleaner into this brush, and it is... You can see a little bit, like there's a little bit of discoloration at the ferrule, but notice that it still makes a perfect tip, even though I have never cleaned this brush. So the reason that I'm getting away with this horrible brush care, this horrible lack of brush care, is that, one, my paint's really thin. So because my paint is thin, yes, that means it's going to wick up toward the ferrule faster, but it also means that when I go and rinse my brush, it comes out a lot easier. And because it's thin, it's going to take a lot longer for it to dry in so many layers that it really affects the shape of the brush. So those are kind of some of the things that play into it. Second, because it's a bigger brush, when I'm mixing, if I'm mixing up my paint like this, I still have, see, there's still brush there. It's not getting up as high as it would be if I was using a smaller brush. So what I should really do is buy a big brush specifically for mixing. And I've done that in the past. I have had my fat butt mixing brush, as I've called it. But I am terrible about this. I will admit that I have a horrible habit of just using whatever brush is in hand to mix the paint and just going for it. If I do get a little bit of more discoloration, then I will use Winsor & Newton brush cleaner and restorer, which pretty much soaks into the ferrule and pulls out a lot of the gunk. But it also can impact the oils on your brush, and just kind of, I find that it sometimes will impact your brush a little bit with these high-end sables. So often I'm just going for it. The other thing to remember is that in my brush lifetime, I've gotten into the habit of rinsing a lot. So I'd say that I rinse my brush extremely frequently compared to other painters. The result of this is that I'm always rinsing it out. It's never getting time to dry in here. So if you tend to load up your brush and just paint with it for a long time before you rinse, you're going to be more prone to problems if you do that sort of thing with your ferrule. Oh yeah, and yeah, I created all of the Reaper paints. So you can also ask questions about the paint. Yeah, I actually designed all of the Reaper paint lines. Only the most new colors that Sadie is doing now, my protege, were designed not by me. So I did all of this. I mixed it by hand. I created these lines from the ground up. I picked the bases for them. I tested them, and I mixed every batch for 15 years. So it's not necessarily a step above. I like to think of it as a step sideways, Coolpack. So what you're talking about as far as what makes a difference here. One, these paints were formulated by a painter for painters. Two, they have a very different body than the other paints you're referring to. Almost every single paint line on the planet these days, here, let me give you guys some eye candy to stare at while I talk about this stuff. And I'll continue with my little mixing experiment here. But almost every paint line on the planet these days, other than Master Series, is formulated for coverage. And what that means is that they're using a paint base. And when I talk about a base, it means the goop that you mix your pigments into. Which is usually a mixture of water, resins, silicates, and binders. Well, not binders, surfactants, which essentially glob everything together. So the base that they are using is heavier and thicker and goopier than ours. They are using that because they are going in the direction of coverage. But coverage is not everything. Coverage is useful for some techniques and really not useful for other techniques. In fact, it can be extremely unuseful. So I am a person who tends to paint with really thin paint a lot. I thin almost everything all the time. So for me, coverage is a detriment because often I'm trying to achieve transparency or translucent paint effects, or I'm trying to get paint to be see-through in some way so that I can produce textures, I can get a smooth blend and get this cool effect here going on. I like to work with thin paint because I can control it and do small details. So when I created this line, I went for a base that wasn't thick and goopy, that didn't fight me on that, and that was actually a little more fluid. So when you use Master Series, you can still use it straight out of the bottle and get 2-coat coverage, but everything else, when you thin it to do everything else like glazes and washes and layering and all this stuff, it works easier with you. You don't have to dump a ton of water into it like you do with those other paints to get them to work that way. Our paint is also chemically different in that we pre-add flow improver to it. So you don't have to doctor it with anything. You can just use water. It works best with water. Even for airbrush, it works best with water. Although I know some people who do like a 10% isopropyl alcohol and water mix to 90% water, 10% isopropyl. And they like how that makes the paint act out of an airbrush. But you don't have to. Our CEO just uses water. Yeah, take it 1 mini at a time. Yeah, the good thing, actually, I think it is, yeah, Karu told you just take it 1 mini at a time. That's the smartest thing. I get overwhelmed too when I've got a whole bunch of minis out in front of me on my table. So what I really do is I pack away everything except the thing that I'm choosing to focus on. And if I decide I'm really bored or don't really like the minis I'm working on right now, I can always pack them away and take out a different mini. But one thing I do though is I keep a sticky note, just a simple little sticky note of what colors I've used on a mini if I really think I'm going to need a reminder. If I've done an unusual mix, for example, that I don't usually do. So that will help me then. If I pack away that mini and I pick it up again 4 months later, I'll have my mixes for what colors I used. So that's really handy. Some people take a phone picture, but what I found was then I have to spend time scrolling back through all my phone pictures, which was a little bit annoying to me. So I just started keeping a little sticky note. Some people also keep a journal. That also can be good, but again, then I would have to page back through my journal. So I've just come to the point where keeping a small piece of paper or sticky note with the model just makes it a little easier for me. So I'm doing a little bit of highlight here, spot highlight, to see how this all works here on this leg here while we're answering questions. Hold on. So yeah, so there you go, Cool Pack. So pretty much the Reaper paint chemically varies by the base, by the very intrinsic building blocks of the paint, and by the fact that we add the flow improver to it. Those are the two biggest differences with our paint versus other people's paint. And people like it, and it's able to compete because it is different. So some painters who paint a lot like me, who like micro detail and who like working with thin paint, most of the time, are drawn to our paint line because they don't have to work as hard to get it to the point where they need it. So that's kind of like just my overview on it. Let's see here. Yeah, that could be the thickness of it, Kariniko, as far as cleaning from your brush easier. Yeah, if you like smooth blending, go use my paint line. Cool. It's going to be, you can achieve smooth blends with Vallejo and with all those other lines. You'll work harder with some of them, you'll work less hard with others. But Reaper will work a lot less hard because you don't have to add nearly as much water to them to get them to the state you need them to be transparent. Just think of it this way. If you're going for coverage out of the bottle, then you're working against transparency. Opacity is the opposite of transparency. So a paint that maybe doesn't cover as well out of the bottle is going to be beautiful for glazes and layering. So it's not, neither one is bad, neither one is awesome. They are both useful, but it's how you're going to use it. So once you figure out what your paint style is, I mean, and try everything, right? Try your wet palette with thicker paint. Try your well palette with thinner paint like I use. See where you get your mileage, see where you get your enjoyment from, then focus. You're very proud of me. Thank you, Tistadoma. That's cool. Like everybody, chat being proud of me makes up for the fact that my dad is not proud of me, okay? And I shouldn't say that. Maybe he is by now. But when I first started on this career path, this miniature painting career path, let's just say there was a bit of dubiousness from the parental unit, okay? Let's see here. Yeah, and there's also apps. That's true. Neva Keats paint. That's totally true. Some people use apps. That's cool. I will say, an old-fashioned paper person, and I love sticky notes. So for me, it just makes sense to put the sticky note with the mini and be done. Let's see here. Yeah, Francis, I mean, then it's just being methodical. Like, maybe it'll benefit you if you do more like what I do, where I always start with, say, a 4-to-1 mix. That way I know, and then I kind of have to track it, right? I have to say, okay, I added 1 drop of this, kind of make a mental note, That's why I do the sticky note. That way I can just, add another drop. I can change this 1 to a 2 if I have to, right? But it's mindfulness at that point, right? Instead of just throwing things at the paint, you can be mindful of it. The other thing to remember, though, is if you're only using 2 colors, you really don't have to keep those notes. Because if you're only using 2 colors and you started with 4 drops of X, it's going to be pretty easy to just keep adding white or whatever until you hit your mix, right? It's going to be pretty easy. So... yeah, I do grizz. I do thin my base coats, actually. That's why I wash these bones models. If you don't wash the bones, you really want to do a full strength mix for your base coat. But I like the smoothness that I get with a base coat if I do a slightly thinned mix. So I'll do, usually it's a 4 or 5 to 1 paint to water. So about 4 or 5 drops of paint, 1 drop of water, mix it up and apply, is what I usually do. I do like just a thinner base coat and how it self-levels, how it goes on really smoothly. It gives me a good base to work up from. I really don't like gloppy. If I put my base coat on, it seems gloppy, or I'm seeing brush strokes and it's not self-leveling, I get really annoyed. So, but yeah, there are so many options. Yeah, I don't use glazing medium at all. For Master Series, I don't find that it's necessary. In fact, the other reason I don't use it is it tends to change the texture of the paint, which I dislike. But again, this is like, everybody's style is different, right? Everybody's coming at it from a different direction. Some people really like the features of glazing medium and how it increases their transparency. I tend to just think that it makes my paint skin over a little faster, and that, considering that I like to do spot wet blends and stuff, that doesn't work for me, but it may work for you. So again, it's like you're right. Every paint has its use. Everything like that. I mean, I am the first person to... I've tried everything, so I encourage you to try everything. Just because it doesn't work for me, even though I'm a pro, even though I do really good painting, doesn't mean it won't work for you. It's all in the feel of the paint for you and how you work with it, right? The best thing I can say is just try everything. Oh, let's see here. Little labels. Oh, yeah, that's a good one. That's that paint splotch on the bottle is an interesting one. I haven't ever heard that cool pack, but that's an interesting thought. Yeah, that's okay. Q is so hard to spell either way. Maybe we should all just use the letter. Yeah, Kritiko, you have to really adjust the amount you thin. I've had to do that because the one paint line that I really like, the one paint line that I like, as far as its matteness being almost a perfect match for Reaper, and just loving generally its colors and consistency, is a Scale 75 Scale Color Artist. The actual tube paint. I've been messing around with these, but even there, I find it's frustrating that I have to thin it so much to get it to the level I like that's workable. But I like the colors enough that I'm willing to work with that. It's going back to tube paints, and I come from a 2D art background, so getting back to the raw umber and the raw sienna and all that is really interesting to me. It's especially interesting to draw comparisons and figure out like what raw sienna is close to in our line, right? Like what Reaper paint is equivalent to raw sienna, things like that. So I like to putz around. But yeah, Kritiko, you'll find that you have to thin them a lot more to get them to do what you want to do, which means it's more time on your part, and then you have to kind of get your intuitive, like how much water you add. You got to kind of rewire that in your brain. Francis, almost no... Okay, so here you go. Drying lighter and drying darker. Almost all acrylic paints will dry slightly darker than they look wet. The exception to this is when you are adding a ton of water, like washes and glazes. In that case, most acrylic paints will dry lighter. So a wash made with acrylic paints will dry lighter, but just putting on the acrylic paint will often cause it to dry darker. And this is because the presence of the base is going to just shift that initial wet look just a little bit. When that base dries, it goes transparent, and so you're getting more of the pigment impact, less of the base impact. So that's why you see a color shift. The more pigment you load into your base up front, however, the less of a shift you're going to see as it dries, because you've got so much pigment in there that the base itself isn't impacting color. And that's because resins are not completely transparent. And resins are the plastics that are used to create bases for paint. Yeah, that's true, Shadow Raven. Actually, it is a mixture. I just did it the other day, Crawley, because I'm working on skin tones with realistic skin tones, and I wanted a raw sienna equivalent, so I'm working on her. I actually got her eyes to the point where I'm a lot happier with her now. But I want the skin. I need to adjust the skin on her. Trying for realism. Trying for a lot of realism on that model. And so what I came down to is actually, funnily enough, colors I use all the time and a color that we are using today. Mix these two. It'll get you close. It's not perfect. It'll get you close. VCR general guideline. Actually, you can go on the Reaper YouTube and look up a class that I gave at ReaperCon last year, which is called Thinning MSP Paints. And in there, I actually give you the base recipe for thinning it to layering consistency, glazing consistency, and all that sort of thing. But the rough assessment is, and it always depends on your opacity. If you have a high coverage color like white, you're going to add a lot more water to get it to go transparent. But in general, my base coats are 4 or 5 to 1. Washes are going to be like 1 drop of paint with 4 drops of brush on sealer and 2 drops of water. Glazes are going to be like 1 to 2, like 2 times water to paint. And layering starts around 1 to 1. But if you're layering with a very light color, it's going to go up closer to 2 to 1 or 1 to 2. And if you're doing pure white, it's even more water. Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Quindy, with the win. Quindy is awesome. So yeah, VCR, if you want to see me babble about this with examples, go down to the YouTube link that Quindy gave you there. It's free. I did it free for forever so that I could answer that question easily. And I'll talk a lot more about why and how during that class. So exactly. So yeah, VCR, the thing to do if you really want to nail this and really get it in your guts, right? Because you want a gut understanding. Ideally, you want to internalize this information, right? So you can always mix, no matter what paint line you're using, you can always mix the right consistency for what you're doing. So the best thing is to just start with a color and a line, a kind of a medium grade color, like a skin tone or a middle blue or whatever, and experiment with adding different ratios of water to it. And then take it, like even on just a piece of paper, and draw some lines, do some dots, see how it looks on your brush, see how easily it comes off, see how long you can paint, how many lines you can paint before the paint starts drying in your brush. But it's also going to be impacted by the size of your brush and the shape of your brush. So go to the Thinning MSP Paints for sure, because I believe I also talk about that. It's important to know that the brush you use directly impacts like the mileage you get out of your paint and how thin or thick it should be for various things. Like it has a huge impact. All brushes are not the same. Yeah, VCR. Yeah, you don't want to do that because, okay, so here, basics of the wet palette. If your paint is drying too fast, if you're only doing 1 drop of paint, you're definitely not using enough paint, for one thing. I tend to use 4 to 6 drops, sometimes even as far as 8 drops, and then I'm adding water to this. So you notice that these paint puddles are pretty big. There's a lot of paint in each of these things. What that does is it keeps this paint wet while I work on it over this hour and a half. So the more liquid you have in here, the less surface area you have exposed, the slower your paint is going to dry out in these well palettes. The secret to using a well palette is to use more paint with a bit of water, and that way it stays at the consistency you need for the length of time you need. I tend to paint in about an hour and a half block. So this show is an hour and a half too. The paint that I mixed at the beginning is still perfectly wet. Like, it's getting a little tacky about the outside, so if I had to use this brown liner again, I would come back and put a brush full of water in it, and it would be just fine. So I find that I can mix it up. It'll go for at least 45 minutes. Maybe at about 45 minutes to an hour, I may have to drop 1 drop or brush full of water into it, and it'll come right back to where I need. So at that point, like when I used to go to paint club on Saturdays at Reaper, and I would be there for 4 or 5 hours, I could keep my paints wet through that entire time, just by kind of like keeping an eye on them and just going, oh, that one's a little tacky, add a drop of water. And I would be able to paint with the same set of paint through the whole paint club. Even using a well palette, which most people are used to thinking about paint drying out in. We do offer like an all colors. If you want to start out with a solid start, though Cool Pack, I would almost recommend just getting the bones line, the complete bones line. Because we have core and we have bones. I use a lot The Bones line is formulated with slightly higher coverage, but just slightly, so it's not going to impact like your layering and stuff. I use a lot of Bones these days. The leather colors I was just mentioning are both Bones. The yellow that I use for this is Bones. But I also use a number of colors from Core that are also unique and key. And by all that's holy, get some pure white. That's all I gotta say. It's the best white on the market, hands down. There is no question. It is supreme. It reigns supreme. All right, let's actually get back to some painting. I think I answered all those questions so far. Cool. In for a penny, in for a pound. Well, you know, I always tell people try a little bit so they're not mad if they buy the whole set and then they decide, well, maybe this paint line isn't for me. But if you think so, if you love to collect paint and you love to play with paint, you know, do you. Do you. All right, I kind of like this color. I think this color is pretty good. So this is the lantern yellow and then adding in white color. And I'm just going up with white at this point. I still feel like maybe I need a little bit more yellow pop to it. I'm not convinced, but I like it, so we're going to go for it. And I did say I was going to mix a verdigris color. So we're going to use Dragon Green, which is another Bones color. It's a green. It's high coverage. Higher coverage, I should say. Higher. And I want it to be a little more blue. Dragon Green is pretty blue, but all things considered, I'm going to use 4 drops of Dragon. And I'm going to drop, I want to use a dark blue to bring it down, because what I want it to be is closer to this old color, Peacock Green. So it needs a lot of blue in it to go that direction. So I'm going to use probably either clear blue or void blue. Maybe void. Void is such a nice dark blue. Let's try a drop of void and see if it gets me close. This also is a Bones blue. So you see what I mean when I say, hey, if you're going to get a big set and you don't want to buy the entirety of the paint line, get Bones. Get Bones, then cherry pick the unique colors in Core, because there are a lot of unique colors in Core. The liners, the clears, pure white, pure black, some of our best colors. All right, so that's a little bit better. Maybe I want another drop of that blue, though. I want a really dark green. So I'm going to grab another drop. So it'll be 2 to 1. When you always start with 4 drops of your original color, it is pretty easy to figure out what you're doing. Good. Yeah, I mean, it's true, Francis. Everybody's got that kind of internal resistance where they're like, but I'm wasting paint. But you're really not, because once you add water to it, I mean, what am I doing? 6 drops of paint, and every bottle has like 350 to 450, so an average of 400 drops of paint in each of these bottles. Like, how many times are you going to be using this color? I do run out of paint. I do run out of walnut. I run out of russet brown. I run out of ruddy leather. I run out of brown liner and blue liner. I run out of white and black. But in general, I don't run out of other things. Maybe I'll eventually run out of lantern yellow because I use it a lot. But in general, I'm not running out of, like, the vast majority of my paint. And you see how much paint I, quote-unquote, waste during every show. I paint every day. But you don't always use the same colors. And even if you do, oh, well, I have to replace 1 bottle of paint every 6 months? Every year? Like, and it's $3.50 bucks? You know, you have to question yourself at that point. If you want to save money, there are so many more effective ways to save money than in skimping yourself on paint. And then, guess what? If you skimp yourself on paint, it dries out faster and you end up wasting more paint anyway. So that's the thing, right? If you just want to use a splash of color, though, Francis, what I recommend for you then, if you just need a tiny bit, keep a wet palette close at hand and just put it on the wet palette. Just do that. If you only need a brush full, then there's no reason not to use 1 drop, but 1 drop in this palette isn't going to go as far as 1 drop on the wet palette. So this is where I say, you know, when I talk about trying different palettes and trying different things, that's where you can expand yourself a little bit. If you know that you're going to be doing spot colors or accent colors, keep your wet palette around. Just put a drop of each of the fancy colors you're going to use, the ones you're going to use just a little bit of, on the wet palette. It'll keep them wet. Put your white on there and just even though you're hand mixing every highlight at that point, because you're doing tiny little bits and you're going back and forth between colors, it's actually the more efficient way to work. So it's always question what is the most efficient way to do this if it really concerns you that you're going through a lot of paint. Yeah, if you use one drop, it'll dry on you instantly. Absolutely VCR. That's why I say always use more. If you're going to be painting with it for a while, it's just like I just told Francis. If you're going to be painting with it for a while, at least use 4 to 6 drops of paint. Plus you're going to be adding 1 to 2 to 3 or more drops of water. That's going to keep your paint wet for hours. It's going to be fine. And like I said, at 400 drops of paint a bottle and only $3.5 per bottle, I think you can afford to just, go for another couple drops. Let's see here. But yeah, if it dries out, then either you're not adding enough water, Val, which is possible. You need more paint and more water, or you need to switch to a wet palette. But if you're trying to do blending, then I would recommend the well palette, and I would remember how many drops I usually use. Use a lot of drops and add the water. And if you really feel if you feel that it's really drying out way too fast for you, if you tend to do marathon paint sessions, then make more of it. Make a deeper well. Right, it's going to get tacky after about 45 minutes. That's when you add another drop of water. Because if you're in a really dry climate, then you've got to adapt, right? So maybe you have to add a little bit of water more often to get the right consistency. Thin lines are usually what you need is a longer, thinner brush and thinner paint, Clover. So if you're doing a really thin line, you want a long, thin brush. You want pretty thin paint. Like if I spread this paint over the surface, you can see that it's pretty thin. Load it up, don't put too much, and you should be able to draw really, really, really thin lines. You can keep your paint a little thicker or use a stronger brown. This is brown liner, so it's meant to go a little bit transparent. Let me see if I can get that in focus. Yeah, there you go. But so long, thin brush, water in your paint. If you find that you want a more thick line, then start with a higher coverage paint. If you want a really thin line, but one that's really dark, start with pure black or walnut brown, because that's a very high coverage paint. I don't know, Val. You'd have to take pictures after if it's drying out on you after 5 minutes and you're using a small palette. I don't remember, I told you ratios, but I didn't necessarily tell you number of drops. If it's drying out fast, double the ratio. If I said 3 to 1 paint to water, then go 6 to 2. But it shouldn't be drying out. It's pretty arid out here. This is not a wet climate I'm in, and I find I have to add a drop of water about every 45 minutes. But, everybody's climate is different. Everybody's environment is different. So if it's drying really fast, just check it maybe every 20 minutes. Set a timer on your phone. Look at it. If you notice, what you should notice is see how it's dried kind of right at the edge here. See how you can see that it's no longer going up the side of the palette. Here you can kind of see it's going up. Here you can see a definite rim. This is the point where you want to add a drop of water. And if it seems still thick, then you should add 2 if you want to keep it fluid. If you know you're not going to come back to it right away, but you still want it for the future, add another drop or brush full of water. It takes some getting used to, just kind of keeping an eyeball on your palette. But your well palette is full of tiny lines, yeah. I scrubbed them off. Yeah, gas heat can also make it for a very dry climate. It is possible that it's that, Val. But just keep it. Either way, the answer is the same. Be conscious of what your paint's looking like, and just kind of adjust your style a little bit. Make sure you keep an eye on it, and try to catch it. Try to catch it and drop more water in it as it gets tacky. And you'll notice, when you try to put a blend on something, you're going to see that you're seeing more lines. But as I recall, like, at least the last one I gave to you, it doesn't matter if you see lines. You just want to get your highlights in the right place and concentrate on breaking up the line between shadow and light. So we're getting there, guys. This isn't bad. I'm going to bring in a little bit more white. And I want to make this highlight a little round because this is her calf muscle technically underneath this armor, so it is kind of rounded. And I want to look at where I'm going. I'm going kind of over that edge there, so I gotta turn my miniature here and make sure I reinforce this shadow and don't go over the top. I do want a shadow there, I just don't want a big heavy line between that and the edge. But my highlight is going to come up to there, and what that tells me is I'm going to have a heavy highlight here too. So, and if you get real close, you're going to see that you can see my lines here on my blends. My blends are not perfect. Let's get real close. I'll have to make sure I anchor my hand so I don't get off camera. I am notorious for getting off camera when I'm really zoomed in. So if you look at my blends here, you can see my brush strokes, no problem. But, I mean, I can come back in and kind of, when my paint is transparent, I can kind of fuzz and blend over those to blend them in, right? So it's kind of, I back and forth a lot. It's not perfect out the gate with me, not ever. Often, I mean, David even does this, my boyfriend does this even more. He'll like totally start just by big blocks of color, like with sharp edges, and I just look at it and go, eek! But then he just spends time refining. So he doesn't mind going through the ugly stick phase where, you know, the whole model kind of looks like it's just big chunky blocks of color. Because then as he starts refining, his reward is in seeing it all like pull together. He just wants to set up his highlights and shadows really fast in the beginning, whereas I tend to work toward mine. So if you haven't watched, I think David also has a class. Did he put his bust class up on our YouTube? Am I right, you guys? After ReaperCon? I think he did the one he did.
Yes, it is there.
Huh? What was that?
I said yes, it is there.
Okay, yeah, he did. I know he did 2 classes, and his bust one, he uses a lot of paint mixing, and he shows you pretty much how he's blocking stuff in on Brad Pitt, i.e. Achilles. And so that's really useful if you look at my style and it doesn't really work for you. Always look at other people's stuff. Let's see, I want to do that, I think, and then... But keep in mind, it's never perfect for us. Like the difference really is that you got to have faith you can fix it. You got to know you can fix it. I mean, acrylics, you can paint over it all day. As long as you're using thinner paint, you can put on a lot of different layers and you're never going to see buildup or detail. So mess around, really, what it comes down to. Yeah, paint a miniature a day is really, really hard, Mrs. MLG. Like, you have to paint fast, right? Now, the good thing is, what you're probably doing with that is you're building brush control. And that's good. But be aware, after a certain point, you'll get diminishing returns from painting fast. Like, there are some techniques, when you get to that level, that point where you want to learn them, where taking your time and observing what's happening is more important than getting stuff done fast. So it depends on why you're painting and your painting goals. I talked a little bit about this yesterday. Rhonda Bender, who's our person who wrote our Learn to Paint kits, and a Reaper painter, she just did a blog entry on this and for her Patreon, but on just identifying why you paint and what your goals are. And this is an important thing, like, you know, because it tells you where you should go. If your goal is, I really want to feel like I actually finish things, then definitely paint fast and do that challenge of mini a day and be really happy when you hit it. But if you are trying to get better and maybe trying to learn some glazing or layering or eyeballs or anything like that, then the focus shifts. It's no longer on being fast. It's about, you know, maybe learning paint consistency or gathering more fine brush control, you know, taking your time. So you got to keep in mind, your goals will vary at varying points in your painting career, and to kind of shift your priorities and what you're doing with those goals. Oh, moving sucks, Quindy. I am so happy I'm done with moving for a little while. The next time we move, we're moving to a house, and then I don't want to move for a long time. Although I have, over the course of moving twice in, 2 years, I have managed to trim down my stuff a lot. So I'm going to put a shadow here, guys, under my highlight. I want a little bit of something to break up that area. I'm going to see how it looks or if my positioning is off. But yeah, by all means, go over to Reaper's YouTube and look at... There's several free classes from ReaperCon that are still up there. All of them are useful, so no matter what level... I would say that David's painting bust class is definitely on the more advanced side, but it can definitely give you ideas. We tend to teach in a certain style here in the US, and it's different from the way they teach in Europe. And often there's less emphasis on things like lighting, right? On noticing how light falls on the model. And they're more like, oh, just learn how to highlight and shade, which is great. But then when you go and try to learn highlighting and shading, it can seem like a whole different world. So just because a class may seem more advanced because it's not the way that you've originally been taught, still, don't acknowledge you can still learn things from it. It still can be useful to you. And then it might be even more useful when you watch it 6 months later, right? It's like reading certain books. I've found that you can read a book and get something out of it, but then if you go back and read it again a year later, suddenly you get a whole different thing out of it. So that's the same with painting. Oh, it's good. Yeah, I paint big also. That's why my personal brand is Painting Big. Which I suppose it's now time to plug my Patreon. I have a Patreon, everybody. Many of you are already patrons, and I really, really appreciate it. It is my main source of income. I do this stream for Reaper, but mostly I survive by my Patreon. So if you want to check it out and think about supporting me, it is patreon.com/paintingbig. And I do a lot of more beginner-based tutorials on that, especially for my $2 tier. And then I also do a little bit more, I'm gearing into a little bit more advanced stuff. But even my mid-range, intermediate stuff is still accessible to new people. I still talk about things that are important for every level. So my first goal for my first year of Patreon, and I was doing it, I started it in the beginning of 2019, so it's been 2 years. I actually should put up a happy anniversary post. But I kind of set out to give just kind of a good baseline for basic techniques and good intermediate techniques and stuff before I started going off on big tangents. Although I did put some advanced stuff in there when I was working on my competition entries. Thank you for the link, Quindy. Yeah, have fun, Shadow Raven. Food is important. Yeah, busts are fun. Maldrakar still on my go back to list. All right, so now that's how our bronze is looking right now. I'm okay with it. It does need green in it though. So I mixed up this beautiful color, which was a 2-to-1 dragon green and void blue, which actually really is really close to peacock green. So I'm very happy. I'm going to add a little bit in here. So when you're doing like a verdigris or weathering on bronze, you want to think about where water pools. Because that area, wherever the water is running and pooling, that's where you're going to get your verdigris. So usually it's going to be in your shadow sections. So you're going to get, in this case, a little bit of it, if the water's running down the side here and kind of running underneath the knee, we're going to get it there. It's probably going to run down here. It's going to pool for sure down here above this little crease. And at first, the green isn't going to show up very much. And if you want to, you can leave it subtle. Often, darker bronze verdigris is pretty subtle. Or you can go back in, lighten it up a little bit, and bring in a stronger color. You can also just like layer it up a little bit. Because this color is so transparent is another reason the green isn't carrying so much. But you can see it here. You can definitely see the green coming up there. So it all depends on, and you can see it up here as well. So it depends on how and when and where like you want your green accents to really show up. If you want them to be really distracting, or if you just want to suggest them, like anywhere that's a little bit of an indentation, like here on the front of the greave, I'm probably going to add a little bit of this green. And here I'm using a stippling stroke, which is dots, doing little dots. If you want to kind of suggest just a little bit of discoloration and interrupt the line, don't make it a bunch. I tend to do this a lot with weathering. I tend to do a stippling thing because I find that it gives me that irregular pattern that I want for this kind of weathering effect. So you can see how I'm kind of bringing that up. You can see how it's been, I've done a couple of layers up here so the green is stronger. I work in segments on dragons for that reason, Karu. Marmundo, thank you. I feel like I've mostly just been talking about stuff this time and not doing as much painting, but you can hopefully see how the green is coming in there. So if I want to, yeah, subassembly for sure. He is a big boy. I have a plastic and I have a resin of Mal. I'll probably never paint the plastic, so I may actually like do a giveaway on my own stream for him at some point. So putting a little bit of light, so I put a little bit of white into my green. If I think that that is too light, I can come back with my original green mix, my darker green mix, and go over the top of that. And it's going to be lighter still, but it's going to take it down a bit. The reason is that since I used so much white in that mix, it kind of counts as underpainting. So when you put a light color and then you paint a dark transparent over the top, you still retain some of that lighter look. Like the color will be more vibrant over the top of it. I do that a lot. I do a lot of underpainting when I want to accentuate a color. So see how I painted lighter, then I came back with my original dark green, but it's still lighter up here, and the color is showing through more because of that light green underneath it. So, but that definitely, see how that adds to the verdigris, because you got to keep that lighter color toward the middle of your previous dark green, because you want it especially heavy in the creases where the moisture would be pooling strongest. So when you are doing this sort of weathering where there's oxidation, keep that in mind. If you want to bring up this lighter type of color. So you can see how tiny I'm getting these lines, by the way, because this brush is so very thin at the tip. Because of my brush control, which, you build up naturally over the course of, the time that you're painting. And also because my paint is thinner. Because my paint is thin here, I can get away with really fine effects, which is why I mentioned when I was talking just about generally about my painting styles, I work so thin with my paint. Usually I'm working on like a 2-to-1 paint to water, or even a 1-to-1 if I'm working with a lot of white, which is really thin, but it allows me to do these really fine effects. So I can get that verdigris. All right, Scrying Eye, thanks for coming in. It's good to see you. I had to say that about painting him in pieces, Karu, just because some people don't. Some people glue him together and then try to paint the whole thing. Big dragons I always paint and then assemble, especially the wings. So that's how our verdigris is coming out, which I'm really happy with. That looks really natural to me. You can kind of see, you can imagine how the waters run down. I might come in with some dark green from below as well, kind of imply that you've got some pool down here to connect to this driblet that came down, see? So bring that in. I think that weathering is some serious fun. I don't often get to do verdigris, so... So yeah, we'll do a lot of this. Maybe if I do the other statue. Although now I'm thinking, since I chose to do bronze on this statue, I'm questioning whether I want to paint the guy statue right away. I may put him off, and we'll come back to him at some future time. Just because I feel like I'm covering a lot of the things I would cover on him. I'm covering on these, having decided to go bronze on these surfaces here on her. So maybe we'll throw a different monster in. I had talked about putting the Ginny in there. The genie. So just expanding. Then you have to decide, well, how much more corrosion do I want? Do I want some more corrosion here? And if I do, I'm going to kind of stipple in a wild pattern where I'm not really paying attention. Just going to bring in a little bit there. Stippling is great. I mean, I am using a good brush for it, which technically could impact my point, but if I'm very gentle about it, it shouldn't be too bad. And I'm also bringing this in. This is just tiny. I mean, you guys can see how much I'm blown up on this. Look at how gigantic my brush is. And I'm bringing in these tiny little dots. But this is what I love to do. I love micro detail, and I like it to look good from a distance. But I also like there to be just a hint of something, and then you get closer and you're like, oh gosh, you know, I love Easter eggs. I like Easter eggs in painting. I like subtlety. And that's just a particular thing about my painting style. A lot of people prefer far bolder effects, and that's cool too. And there are times you go for those, for sure. But sometimes I just like there to be just a little bit of fun where, like, if I zoom out now, you can still see the verdigris. You can still see the verdigris, right? But if you zoom in, you can see the subtleties of the verdigris. So, you know, I like there to be that. I like there to be the, oh, look, you did a bit of verdigris. Oh, it looks really cool, you know, when you get close. I don't dragon. I find that Master Series sticks great. I haven't sealed anything in a long time. The exception is if I notice that I haven't actually been watching Michael at all. It doesn't surprise me that he stipples, though. I think most of us who like textured effects do. I haven't watched, I have to admit, I haven't watched one of Michael's streams in ages. Because most of the time I don't have time. I've got a tight schedule throughout my workday during the week for my freelancing. Dragon, if I do seal, it would be like, so let's say I've got a model, say like Zari here with her dogly. And I notice that this is always rubbing off, or this is always rubbing off, or maybe the top of her head is rubbing off. Then what I'll do is I will touch up, seal with brush on sealer, and then maybe do another touch up over the top of that to just kind of give it a triple layer up there, including a layer of sealer. I might seal again after I do the second one. And that'll help me protect specifically areas that I feel are rubbing off. But in general, I find I don't need it. If you are going to be gaming with a piece and you want to seal a lot, do so. I like brush on sealer better than spray on these days. Mostly because the brush on sealer is a little bit flexible, and when you have a model like a Bones, which is definitely flexible, you want something that is flexible that's not going to flake off if something bends. And a brush on sealer is generally more flexible than a spray on sealer. Let's see, anything else? Oh, green stuff, yeah. Yeah, no problem, Dragon. When it comes down to it, remember I mostly paint display. So my stuff, even though, you know, I'm handling some of these a bit, but most of my stuff isn't going to be like grabbed all the time every day or over the course of a session. I also find, I mean, a lot of times it depends on how you pick up your mini. If I'm doing a gentle grip on the middle of the mini and all these big rounded surfaces, it's generally not going to rub off. Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, the thing is with sealers that it can change your finish, and it can change it can shift color. You could, with spray sealers, it's really dangerous. You can lose some of your highlights and then have to reapply them. That's one thing I never liked when I used to dull coat, for example. But that sort of thing. But yeah, otherwise, I used to seal all the time when I used other paint lines. Like when I used Vallejo, I found it rubbed off really easily for me, and so I would do like 3 layers of highlight, do a spray of dull coat. Do more highlights, do layers of dull coat. Do some shadows, do a layer of dull coat, so that I'd have like this impenetrable shell of dull coat by the end of it. But not anymore. Not for years and years and years and years. Ever since Master Series, like this was one of the things that I specifically looked for with Master Series, guys, was adhesion. The ability of the paint to cling to the model. I had gone through so many paint lines that rubbed off so easily because of the softer base that I wanted something that was higher acrylic and higher durability so that you could get some serious durability on it, that you would not see it rubbing off all the time. I mean, there's always going to be those points on something, like the point of a cape or the point of an ear or the point of a something. Horns, claws, they're notorious for it. Those are always going to rub off. It's just like, it's kind of the nature of the beast. But in general, most of your paint should stick on the mini just great with Master Series. Yeah, VCR. Yeah, and sprays are vulnerable to humidity. Yeah, or temperature. They're very vulnerable to temperature as well. Yeah, that's kind of I loved the certain things about it, but then I hated other things about it. Yeah. So Master Series paint, when I made the line, is kind of a culmination of me having used so many different brands over the years. Several different iterations of Games Workshop, Poly S, Ral Partha paint, the old Reaper paint. I was using a Vallejo. I was using so many different things that I had a very good idea of the qualities that I would want in my ideal hobby paint. And so when I got the opportunity to do that for Reaper is when I integrated that. And that's why Master Series ended up so different from everyone else. I mean, there are qualities that it has in common with some paint lines, but then there are other qualities that are very different. And so yeah, that's why it's a very different beast. Very different beast. All right. Well, it's about 10 after, and that's about perfect. So, Justin, what have we got for rating?
Let's see here.
Yeah, it's true. Even brush on campaign. Well, it puts a layer over everything, right, Francis? So, I mean, when you've got that happening, you absolutely can see a variation.
We have let's rate Brush for Hire.
Brush for hire. We have not. Gosh, I can't even remember the last time. Yeah, no problem, Mrs. MLG. We're here every day in the morning, 11:30 a.m. Central Time, USA, and it goes about an hour and a half. And I also do my own stream, but that's a D&D stream. I will be going on this afternoon, guys, although we may talk a lot about like character goals and like what we want to do, our coming adventures. I have you guys choose where you'd like to go next. So, all right. So I will talk to you guys later and see you tomorrow morning, if nothing else. Thanks, and welcome to the new people. It's nice to meet you all. Off we go.
And in case you are new and you want to see more of stuff like this, we have another show today at 3 p.m., 4 p.m. Central Time. Sorry, 4 p.m. That is the Crow's Nest. It's going to be another AMA, and you'll have another fantastic painter, Michael Proctor, and one of our sculptors. Actually, we host a show. It'll be great. So if you haven't seen that, come check it out. It's called the Crow's Nest, and we hopefully we'll see you guys there.